I'm here in Vegas at Caesar's Palace, and I wanted to give you a wrap up of my experience at Ryan Pineda's WealthCon and share with you the amazing things that God did during the event. On day one, I arrived at Ryan's offices for the MVP event, training, and tour, and I arrived a little bit late, so the room was already packed. And as I was looking around for a seat, I realized there's 3 seats over on the right-hand side. So I walked myself up and sat down. And then I realized that I sat in front of Cap Chatfield, the guy with 1 million subs on YouTube. And of course, that's a guy I want to meet since I'm just getting started on social media. When we broke for lunch, I started up a conversation with Cap, and we talked about God in the workplace, in the marketplace, and how we allow him to be the CEO at work and also in our personal lives, and how we want to help others to do the same. And we realized we have a lot of things in common, and turns out he's going to be speaking in my city in a couple of weeks, so we're going to be able to follow up and connect there. It turns out he's a great guy. He's the real deal, and a guy I really connected with. Now, was that coincidence that I ended up a little late? Was it coincidence that the only seats available were right in front of him? Or was that God's timing, and was that the opportunity that God had arranged for both of us during that first day of meetings? Well, it was God. So later that night, I attended the VIP welcome party. About 150 entrepreneurs, real estate investors, and everyone's networking, grabbing a bite. And I did the same. But I felt a little tired and I was ready to go back to my room. Well, I heard the voice of God, and he said, "Don't go yet." So I stopped right where I was. I was only a few yards from the door, and I was ready to go. But God had another plan. So as I'm standing there, a guy comes up to me and introduces himself, starts to share what he does, where he's from, why he's at the conference. And then I began to share that I'm a peak performance coach focused on faith first. Most coaches are going to focus on mindset, natural skills and abilities, life experiences, and try to help to kind of pivot and shift your perspective. I do those things, but I start with faith first. And of course, I shared some stories with him about the past 20 years of coaching and living a lifestyle of all in for God, professionally and personally. And when I finished sharing, he looked at me and said, "I'm ready. How do we get started?" Now, without God stopping me, without God causing me to wait, without my obedience in that moment, with all the noise of 100+ people talking and the music playing, I recognized and I obeyed. And God allowed me to connect with the last person that night who was in a position where he wanted to go all in, and he wanted what I had to offer. Obviously, that was God. Obviously, it was my obedience, and that's my lifestyle. So I encourage you to go all in for God. Trust him in the workplace, and he will open doors that you can't open for yourself because you don't see those doors. The next morning, he paid his deposit, and during lunch, we had our first session. And after that session, he was so pumped. He was so excited. His wife was with him. He went and told his wife, "Wow, look, I'm going to get on the path that I've been trying to get on, but now I have a framework." And it's all because I was able to obey God, and God brought us together as part of God's plan. And that's only day one. So after lunch, we went back to the conference, and the event was over. Then that evening, I went to the VIP after party. And again, there's 100, 150 entrepreneurs, business owners, real estate investors, networking, sharing about their experience at the event, and just having a good time. And I was able to connect with Cap again. And so we're standing there talking, and then a guy comes up and is talking to us, and we're just having a good time. And then a husband and wife walked up behind me, and it turns out they recognized Cap, so they were coming over to say hello to him, but he was busy talking to this other guy. So as I turned around, I began to talk to them, and they shared why they're there and what's going on, and that they had come up to say hi to Cap, but they were just patiently waiting since he was busy talking. And I started having a conversation with him and sharing what I do. And then suddenly, again, God spoke to me and revealed that he had some things he wanted them to know. So I began to share what he was saying, and they started crying and tears flowing because they knew it was God speaking. They knew these were personal requests that they had been praying for, and that God was answering their prayers. Now, was that a coincidence, or did God orchestrate that meeting, speak to me, and all I did was obey? I recognized his voice, so I obey. I've been doing it for over 20 years, and I'm always ready to serve others by serving him. And there was no benefit for me except for being a blessing to this couple. And they walked away with peace, with answers to their prayers at an after party at a business conference. Now that's God in the marketplace. That's the kingdom of God in the marketplace. And I've only seen this kind of level of God being involved in a conference day after day at the WealthCon in Vegas. I want to encourage you never to underestimate the people and the circumstances that God can bring you into and connect you with, and how he can bring the people and the circumstances together, and it'll just blow your mind. On the final day of WealthCon, Ryan decided to start the day with a praise and worship service. Amazing at this type of an event that he would be bold enough to invite God, the kingdom, into that environment to start off the final day. Now, I noticed the girl behind me was praising God and definitely in love with God and really into the praise and worship. And I heard God say, speak to her. You need to speak to her. Now, after the service was over, I was part of the prayer team, so I got up and went up front, and we invited people who needed prayer to come up. So I didn't have an opportunity to speak with her at that time. I was able to pray for two men. Both of them encountered the presence of God. They both had tears flowing because they knew God was speaking to them through my prayers. And they were feeling relief. They were feeling freedom, peace. They carried a burden. They had a struggle. And they simply came up for prayer, but what they received was more. They received his presence, his love, his peace at this business conference. Amazing. Always amazed, never surprised at how God works when we just allow him to, when we invite him to. Use us to be a blessing. Bless us to be a blessing. So after the final speaker spoke on the final day, I still had not seen the woman from earlier, and I was looking around and I didn't see her. And so I entered the aisle and I began to leave, and I began to walk out. And as I looked up, I said, wait a second, I think that's her, right there standing against the wall. And so I asked her, were you sitting up front earlier praising God? And she said, oh, yeah, that was me. And then I told her, God wanted me to talk with you. She said, oh, that's great. Yeah, I love the Lord. And so she shared with me what she was doing, where she was from, why she was there, how she had come to the WealthCon conference in Vegas in faith. She was debating if she should come or not. She wasn't really sure, but she decided, no, I'm just going to go in faith and see what God does. And sometimes that's what we have to do. We just have to step out in faith and trust God to do something. And so she asked me, what do I do? And I started to share that I'm a peak performance coach, faith first, been doing it for 20 years, and I help people that want to go all in with God, not be a church Christian anymore, a part-time follower, but a full-time follower, whole life, full on, all in, professionally and personally, allowing him to provide the success, to lead us to success that's beyond what we can do for ourselves. And she looked at me and said, how do we get started? So once again, for a second time at this short conference, God orchestrated a meeting, brought two people together, and opened the door for a collaboration. And I can just give God all the credit and all the glory. Now, was it coincidence? Obviously not. She was at the point where she wanted to go all in. And she just needed help to have a picture of what that looks like and how to get started and how to create a framework, to have a blueprint for what it looks like to live an all-in lifestyle, which I've been doing for over 20 years and coaching for 20 years, helping others, high net worth individuals, elite achievers, high performers. The thing is, with a high performer, you're always competing against somebody else, performing against somebody else, but God created you uniquely qualified, perfectly imperfect, to do one thing, not compete with everybody else, but to be the best version of yourself. And the elite achievers, there's always a new achievement. And so in the past, I've worked with many rich people, but they were broken in other areas. And recently I felt a burden to start working with millennials, entrepreneurs, people who are transitioning from the 9 to 5 and wanting more out of life and wanting God to be more involved in their professional and personal pursuits, but really don't know how. It's something we don't learn in church because the pastor is a pastor. I'm a coach. But the pastor is teaching broad ideas and concepts, and that's what they're called to do. I'm called to work with people individually to help them become the best version of themselves in the workplace and in their professional pursuits. And so she realized that, and later that night, she went ahead and made her deposit. We met up at the after party, and I gave her a personalized copy of our first book, and she's already started with the program. So her life has already begun to be transformed, and it was just in that moment of meeting. And in my moment of obedience, of looking around and saying, I didn't really want to leave until I saw her, and he put her right in that spot where I would look up and see her, and she was right there. God is amazing. And if we trust him and we step forward in faith, he'll do amazing things for us that we couldn't do on our own. We just can't comprehend what he does until we experience what he does in us and through us and for us. So I wanted to share this amazing testimony with you about my first trip to Vegas, my first experience with Ryan Pineda's WealthCon, because it was such an impactful experience. Every single day, every step of the way, God was moving, and I talked to so many other people who had similar experiences where God was orchestrating connections and showing himself in the networking events, in the meetings, in even where people were sitting, and being able to connect with people around them. And I'll say I've been to a lot of conferences, conventions. There's nothing quite like this if you're a believer, if you have faith in God, and if you want to go all in with him in your professional and your personal pursuits. What Ryan's doing here with WealthCon and with Wealthy Kingdom Project and the Bible studies that he has, he's really pushing to help you get involved, help others get involved with God for their whole lives. He's living it out. I've been living it out. And so many people that I met are also pursuing all of God in all of their lives. And that's what I've been helping people do for 20 years. So I'm so excited at what I've experienced here. And I wanted to share it before I leave, get this down, and didn't want to miss anything or forget anything. Wanted to deliver it to you so you can be encouraged. If you trust God, he will direct your path. He will put you in the path of people that you can be a blessing to and that can be a blessing to you. He will orchestrate circumstances and situations and meetings that could seem coincidental, just happen, could seem lucky, but they're not. They're part of his plan when you're walking and living in his plan, when you're believing him for outcomes, when you're trusting him to help you to network, to help you to see opportunities, to help you to succeed. You're going to find that he is willing and able, more than able, more than willing, and he's just waiting for us to go all in, to not live in the gray area, to not withhold parts of our lives that we feel like he might not be interested in. He's just waiting for us to go all in so he can show us how much he loves us, how much he wants us to be blessed, the favor that he has for us, and how he wants us to succeed wildly when we're living in his plan, his perfect plan for us. And that was on full display at WealthCon in Vegas. And I just had to share it because why not give you the updates? Why not share with you what God is doing in real time, in real life? I can share with you 20 years of experiences, my own personal experiences, and the experiences of clients. But this was so important to share with you, and hopefully you're inspired. You're excited about how God can work through you and in your workplace and in the marketplace to accelerate your success, to help you create wealth. Wealth is not just money, it's peace, it's fulfillment, it's happiness, it's not working 18 hours like I did when I had a .com. I had a .com and I was working 18 hours for 3 years straight. So I understand that the entrepreneurial journey does require working extra hours. But if you want each hour that you work to be maximized, each hour that you work to be the most efficient and the most effective, then I suggest, based on my experience, that you connect with God, allow him to be the CEO, allow him to be the CEO, and you become the COO. Allow him to guide and direct you and to bring all the puzzle pieces together. And then you won't have to stress and worry and strive. You'll just enjoy the journey.